Hey everybody, this is DM Mike, and this is the next campaign diary for DOIP. We are on our second playthrough, just in case you're joining us for the first time. This is the campaign diaries that cover this second playthrough, and I'll tell you right now, it has been radically different from my first playthrough, that's for sure. Here's the stats from this game. If you look at the rolls, it looks like not a lot happened, but actually a lot did. A heck of a lot did. Story-wise, and I think between players and NPCs, and we'll get into all that. This might be a little shorter campaign diary. But we only had one combat encounter, I think like 420s, maybe? No, I don't know how many natural ones we had, but of course 15 jokes, which is pretty high. It was a very lively table last Saturday when we played. But we had a good time, and we ended up in Butterskull Ranch. We had just finished Butterskull Ranch. If you looked at the last campaign diary, they had overcome great odds to destroy 10 heavily armed and pretty beefy orcs by the skin of their teeth. Soon as that battle was over, Grok walked over to a tree, laid down, put down his weapons, and went to sleep. Everybody had suffered a lot of hits, had been dropped, ran out of spells. I don't think hardly had any potions left, and were, I think, at level 2 and level 3 exhaustion, kind of scattered around. I'm not sure who had what, but a lot of people had gotten hit critically throughout that encounter. So everybody was pretty exhausted. Now, they immediately spent some time going around the property and trying to find Big Al. Like, where the heck is he? Now, I put him in the large house, the big house. And that's where Naya and Beazle, I think Beazle, found him in there. Funny enough, Naya was the first one to go through and actually ransack and fleece the entire area. Which I thought was kind of comical. She's become, I know we have a resident thief, but I think right now we actually have 2 thieves in the campaign. She kind of went through the back end of the house and went through his stuff and got his keys, a key ring full of stuff, and found some of his gold and pocketed those. And as Beazle was coming through trying to fleece the joint, well, it had already been kind of taken care of. And she was the only one who did that. She was the only one in that room. So she walked away with all that coin and these keys that just kind of really just go to the property in different areas of the property. So it was kind of comical to watch that happen. But Big Al implored them if they would help him find his missing farmhands, any missing horses, and to make sure no orcs were around the property. I just simply rolled a 1d4. I came up with a 3, so it took 3 hours for them to do all this as they went around the property to make sure nothing else was going on. They ended up finding only 1 or 2 horses, I think, a very small poultry amount. Poultry, is that right? It sounds like chickens. Not a lot of horses. They couldn't find all the farmhands, so some farmhands are missing. They don't know where they're at. They ended up burning all the orc bodies after looting them, of course. I think Naya took all the steel, the great axes, anything they had on them, so she could bring them back to Phandalin and give them to the blacksmith. She's kind of hoping for full plate mail armor. And Big Al, invited him to stay over the night. He kind of felt a little bit safer with him overnight. And also asked their help if they could take like around 25 to 30 horses from Butterskull Ranch to Phandalin. Now, this was important because now Phandalin is looking at evacuating, and they can do this much faster, much easier with a lot of horses on hand. And of course, these horses will be valuable to the militia as well, and to the patrols and guards that are in Phandalin, so they can move around the property a little bit faster. But now that he's missing farmhands, the farm doesn't feel secure. He doesn't really want to take on this whole responsibility himself. So he implored the players if they would help him do so. He's going to give them each their own horse. And as a DM, actually, I gave them like strong horses. So I think a typical horse's HP is about 22 hit points. In this case, I think I went up to 35 for them. So these are stronger horses. He did give out the mithril chainmail, which is part of the adventure. I had it hidden on the property. It was actually underneath the anvil in the blacksmith. He just kind of went into the blacksmith area, took off his long pole, which, could have been used for anything, some kind of tool or whatnot. But he stuck it into the anvil, twisted it, and anchored it and pulled it open, and there was the mithril chainmail. And I think Naya actually got this as well. It's funny, I think Naya just kind of walked away with everything that night that we played. I don't think, of course, out of game everybody knew. The players, though, the characters did not know. But wow, she really made out as a bandit. She should open her own thieves guild. Well, that morning they got all their horses together, got their breakfast, and headed out. Now, if you look at the map, it's like a 65 to 75 mile trip. This is not easy to take. And when you're corralling a bunch, like 30 horses, which I used as group tokens, so I wasn't going to put 30 tokens plus, the heroes and their horses. That was just way too much. So I did these huge, like little group tokens on there. But it's a long trek, and even though it took them maybe 3 to 4 days to get there, it's going to take probably twice the amount for them to get back, or at least close to that. We kind of just got the horses and we rolled. They went as far as they could each day. I rolled for encounters and nothing kind of happened. Now, this is when the first combat encounter happened, and the only combat encounter of the night. And this is when the Gnolls and riding on the backs of wargs showed up. Now, I've been foreshadowing a lot of these Gnolls several times. I think through like 3 of the sessions out of the 6 we've had, as they've been off in the distance. And you know, this was a gravy train really for them. Okay, 30 horses plus the heroes, so 35 horses, leaving a huge trail, very easy to spot, very easy to track. Usually when the characters were out, we'd roll for it, the Gnolls would miss them or they wouldn't see them, they'd be off in the distance. But this time, this was too big of a beefy target to miss. And what was hilarious about this encounter was, as soon as the Gnolls were spotted, I used this, a musical cue from Vermintide 2, which was just such a great soundtrack, for the Gnolls showing up on the back of these wargs, and they are ravenous, they are hungry, and they are desperate. But the first thing the tank did was take a quick look. Grok took a look at what was coming and said, no thank you, and dashed immediately away from oh God, away from the other players, away from Big Al, away from all the escort duty from the horses, and just dashed 120 feet east or whatever to the right, right out of there as soon as he saw it, which I thought was kind of hilarious, and not in a cowardly way. He was just like, it's too much, gone, right? So I thought that was kind of funny. And as soon as he did that, I let him do it, and then we rolled right into initiative combat. And the funny thing is, I won't go to all the beats of this combat. I didn't beef up anything in this encounter. I did not take the Gnolls or the wargs and beef them up as far as hit points. I just left them as is. And here's the thing. They were not after the heroes. They were after the horses. That's all they wanted. Every attack, it only lasted like 3 rounds. Every attack was concentrated on those horses, and I think they lost 3 to 5 horses, something like that. Not nearly enough, really, but the Gnolls did what they could, the damage that they could. I think Seamus kind of used one of his spells to make some difficult terrain, and then Gib shot a spell out that shrunk one of the wargs. There was some skirmish there. There was a little bit of back and forth. Now, not for Grok. Grok was like, phew, he was just out of it, completely out of it. But those who had stood behind and tried to get those horses moving did what they could. And I think there's only a few attacks that actually made towards the heroes, and that was only if somebody kind of advanced towards the group. I had 6 Gnolls there and 6 wargs. They were kind of separated into 2 packs, and one pack went ahead to kind of cause a distraction, while the other pack was just focusing on the horses. That's all they wanted to do. I think actually it's funny because I think both sides felt like they were outmatched, and the Gnolls felt that way too, but it was just like, we don't want to skirmish with you, we just want those horses. So there was a little bit of skirmish back and forth. A few people got hit. I think most of that second pack that was just the kind of distraction actually was almost completely wiped out. I think most of them were wiped out. And so they weren't really that difficult to deal with. They just had to be, pushed away, scared away. And I think some of the spells and that difficult terrain that was created by Seamus and Gib really made a difference. There was one really cool moment. I gave it up to Beazle. I gave him inspiration afterwards. He used his little pan flute to call the horses to him, to move them, like to get them to dash towards his location. He was mimicking something that Big Al had done, and on his turn, he used that opportunity to get those horses completely out of the way because he could see all the Gnolls were attacking the horses directly. So I thought that was really clever in the moment. I love clever stuff. And so I immediately gave him inspiration after that. So it was a really good call on his part, using his little pan flute, which I think at that point, he'd only used it like at a local bar or something like that. So it was a clever use of an instrument. But here is where the battlefield changed. With this gravy train of horses and the smoke from Butterskull Ranch immediately called forth the dragon. The dragon could ignore this. Like something was going on, and he was going to be there. He showed up to see what the hell was happening. And of course for him, like the Gnolls, was a gravy train, a sizzler, if you will. Are they still around, a sizzler? I think so. But a sizzler of just food. like a just whole gravy train of food for him. Now at the table they did have a vision, because here comes the dragon. I kind of broke it down into a 1 minute, like a minute 15, minute 30 cutscene at the table using a soundtrack from Mandalorian. And when the dragon showed up, of course, it's scoping out what the heck's going on there, but sees all those horses and was like, okay, yeah, dinner time. And while it was attacking, the heroes got a vision, and they saw like knights dressed almost like paladins or cavaliers, dressed in full plate, and they were ghosts on the battlefield, and they were watching the dragon almost as if they wanted to attack the dragon, but they couldn't because they're ghosts. But all the players' eyes kind of glowed blue, and they can see this. But suddenly that vision passed, and the dragon just went down, attacked, scooped up a bunch of horses. I think they lost another 15 or so, and went off in the distance. And by the time the players looked around, the Gnolls had said, nope, similar to Grok, nope, and got out of there very, very quickly. They were scared to death and got out of there. And I think Gibb shot off a magic missile right as the thing had gone past them, and you can kind of see it. You could see the trail of the magic missile kind of hit the dragon up in the sky, but by that point, it didn't really matter. The dragon was gone. So it was a kind of fun, little unexpected, tense encounter there. And they took what horses they had left and headed back to Phandalin. And this is kind of where the night changed a little bit. We had a lot of character personality start to clash with the events that are going to unfold at Phandalin. They got back really late at night, and they immediately wanted to tell Carson, what had happened, what was going on at Butterskull Ranch. Carson was not there, just Wester was available. But they spent the night and got some rest, and next morning kind of started sorting through all of this. And while they were talking to the jailhouse individuals, in my campaign I've actually added a jail where Carson kind of operates out of. Well, they heard somebody. They were trying to find Carson, and were going about talking about Butterskull and all this stuff and whatnot. And then in the jailhouse, way in the back jail, I should say way in the back of the cell. Well, no, that's not English either. In the cell in the back of the jailhouse, I think that works, was a voice. And they heard it, and the guy was kind of yelling out, put his hand out the cell, had his face up against the bars, and lo and behold, Prospero had showed up, something they were not expecting. And Grok didn't like that very much. He had, going back to Dwarven Excavation, those two didn't really get along very well. I think there was just a trust issue here. First thing he did was walk down there, look at Prospero there behind the bar as he was kind of looking up at Grok, who's like 8 feet tall. And he grabbed him by the shoulders and banged his head against the jail cell and knocked him out. And that was the first meeting. So I think it was Naya or Gibb, somebody did something, I think a spell or whatnot, I think a healing spell to kind of bring him back around. They were just trying to figure out, what the hell are you doing here? You were supposed to be back in Neverwinter. You were going away. You opted to leave. Well, it turns out that Prospero, on the way back to Neverwinter and was going back to his secret ways, back to the Underdark, he stumbled across the orcs. He stumbled across a lot of orcs near some kind of stone circle. And there were 2 other ogres and what looked like a shaman. And they'd had a discussion about this, about what some of the the heroes were facing, talking about the orcs and the shaman and all this kind of stuff. So he put two and two together. And was like, okay, maybe I can sell this information. So he came back from Neverwinter and was going to put, a nice little price on this intel, but was caught by the local militia overnight as he was trying to scope out the place and just see where was Grok and all of them, where was all these heroes that had showed up, But at that time, they were at Butterskull Ranch taking care of orcs. So the militia did not kill him, nor did Carson. They just kind of put him in the jailhouse and said, look, when the heroes get back, these people you're talking of, they can vouch for you. We'll see what happens. So they eventually talked to the guards, got him out of there, and tried to convince him to share this information with, of course, Wesker and whatnot, and Carson whenever he decided to return. And of course, there was a lot of animosity and mistrust still from Grok. When he was allowed to have his weapons back, Grok just took those. Grok was like, nope. He took all his weapons, all his supplies and stuff, and just left him with nothing. There was a lot of clashing back and forth. And I have to give it up to Gibb on this one. I think Gibb, not only through this encounter with Prospero, so much more happened, but with Prospero, with these NPCs, was there as a peacekeeper. I think he did a really good job of role-playing all this kind of peacekeeping, the best he could, trying to placate everybody's suspicions and needs, because it bled out, not just, in the jailhouse, but overnight. What were they going to do overnight with this character? Would he sneak away? And he ended up spending the night with Beazle in the end, so they can keep an eye on him, but nothing happened. They went to Wesker and talked to him about negotiating a price for some intel, and that was kind of an intense moment, or I should say just tense. It was just a tense moment of, like, I'm not going to give anybody any more money. I don't know who this guy is, Wester said. But there was a lot of back and forth between that, and Gibb, in that same situation, was doing a really good job of trying to keep people straight and keep them from going too crazy or offering up, ridiculous demands. I think at one point Grok trying to walk behind Wester as he was negotiating with Gibb about how much money to give for this intel, and I think he was trying to be a little intimidating. And at one point, I think we almost agreed upon a price. We were rolling skill checks back and forth, persuasion skill checks, and he had to beat my score and whatnot. And I think Grok slammed Wester's head down onto the table, and of course Wester was not having any of it. It was just like, what the hell are you doing? Why are you standing behind me? Get away! He was just very, very frustrated. When it comes to Wester, I have ran him like two individuals. He is basically Scrooge McDuck when it comes to coins and gold and negotiating. He's a little naive to a lot of things, but as soon as you start talking price and you want to negotiate on things, boy, he is solid. And no amount of kind of intimidation is going to move Wester in any way. He is completely focused. So he's very much a Scrooge McDuck. And also for his humor, I kind of play him like the, I can't remember this guy's name, but in Blazing Saddles, the mayor's sidekick. I can't remember the guy's name, opposite of Mel Brooks. I kind of run them like a mash of those two, with the humor and ridiculousness, but also the tenacity and focus when it comes to negotiating gold and prices. So it was pretty entertaining going back and forth on this and hearing the explanations. And again, I think Gibb did a great job of, I think I pushed him. Like I was trying to push, like, explain to me, I need more. You just saying things or just us rolling is not going to be enough. And I think he was really good at giving some plausible explanations as to why we should agree to this and do that and whatever. So it was a really good kind of, I would say, a spotlight moment. This was a very, very spotlight campaign where it was focused here, and it was focused here, and it was focused here. And it was actually, some really good role playing. And I think that's when Dungeons and Dragons comes to life. I didn't plan any of it. It was all of us just coming together there and making that situation happen. And that's when it was a lot of fun. And as, of course, everybody who comes into Phandalin, all the heroes, they all tend to split up. So that kind of created another spotlight episode where I had to focus as a DM. If you're a new DM, you'll have to do this, kind of turn that spotlight onto individuals and stay there for a bit. And of course, pacing and time is always iffy. How long do you stay? It's kind of a gut feeling kind of thing. But there was just so much information being passed back and forth. I kept that spotlight there for a little bit. I know Seamus had gone off in a different direction. He'd gone to the church to talk to the, I think the lady, I never can remember her name, of the church. And he wanted to know more about this kind of statue they found and whatnot. They did find another totem at the Butterskull Ranch, and get some information from her. So after I was done with Wester and all the stuff that was going on, switched that spotlight over and focused on Seamus. And I was on him for good 15, 20 minutes. Which can feel like a lot of time, but it was important. He had a lot of questions, there were a lot of things going on, and they were concerned about the Banshee because the next move is to go to Axholm. And well, that was up for debate for a little bit, but they eventually landed on Axholm. But they were like, how are we going to do this? We ain't got magical weapons. How can we do this? And so the priest offered up this idea of, we could, because there's a reliquary, I put a reliquary below that church. And it's a very small church, by the way. It's not like some big TV evangelist-sized church here. But there's a small reliquary where the citizens can bring their things, their totems, their talismans, and stuff like that, and store them in the reliquary. So her idea was, we probably, in a way, could enchant some of your weapons, not all of them, because all the citizens are just not going to give up everything. These are religious artifacts. But we could shatter an artifact. And in doing so, that magic would imbue itself into something else. It would kind of do like this transference somewhere else. And so it's a dicey proposition It could be explosive, but it is a way to maybe enchant these weapons. It may only be temporary. We don't know what's going to happen. But there may be a way to do this so you can go face the Banshee. They have some spellcasters, but it's just not enough. I think you only got really one concentrated spellcaster. And then, of course, you do have the Cleric. But two of them trying to do the job of all this would be very, very difficult and very, very risky. So that was the idea that was offered. And there was all of this kind of talk of like, well, how will that work? And how can we do this? And so we kind of left it there. This is the end of the night, right? So we left it there. There's a lot of questions up in the air. How are we going to enchant these weapons? Will the citizens give up their goods for us to do this? And I wanted to make sure that we ended the session with some kind of decision of where the hell we were going next, because there were still a couple things left on the table. And they did eventually settle an Axel. So there you have it. One combat encounter, the dragon showed up, and a good 3 hours probably spent in role-playing. So it was a very interesting, fun, entertaining session because of conflict. And not because of Gnolls, but the inner conflicts between the party and with other NPCs. Because half the players are okay with Prospero. They want to give him a fighting chance. Let's see what he's made of. The other half is like, no, I don't trust the guy, especially coming from Grok. I don't want this guy around, and for good reason. But, so that inter-party conflict really makes for an engaging session. So that's it, everybody. That is the Campaign Diary. When we meet again this Saturday, we begin the journey to Axholm, and we're going to see how that unfolds. All right, guys, that's it. See you in the next one.